Today, we're going to talk about the tip of the arrow. Let's just suppose you're going out to a remote community. Now, it's often a big journey. It might be a whole day's travel, but let's just suppose you start in the morning. You're there already and you start in the morning. And that is, like you could say, the tip of the arrow. And you may spend 6 or 7 hours on that community, a couple of hours with people beforehand, time in the meeting itself when you present, and time afterwards. So let's just imagine you're spending 8 hours. Out of that 8 hours, perhaps the meeting time itself is an hour and a half, and perhaps your time in that meeting is 1 hour. So let's actually put an hour and a half, which is the meeting time, and an hour is how long you're going to be there. So you're on the community for that length of time. The meeting time is 1.5 hours, and your time is 1 hour. Now, when you're talking to people, you will notice that quite a lot of the time people's attention is distracted. They'll be looking out of the window, falling asleep, talking to other people. There may be interruptions. So out of that hour, perhaps we could very, very optimistically say that you have people listening to you, fully attending to what you say for 50% of the time. So that is the ultimate tip of the arrow. So you've got half an hour out of that whole day attention. But of course you had to get to the community. Let's just suppose you drove there or flew there. So let's say it's basically a day to travel somewhere really remote. So you had another day you've got to add on to the arrow as the tip of the arrow. And of course you had to come back. So let's add another day on and call that 2 days. And then of course there was the preparation time. So you had to prepare, you had to think about it. So let's add another half a day on here for that at least, maybe even another day. Let's be just optimistic, half a day. Then if you've got a big organisation, you've probably had a organisational meeting to discuss rolling out to 20, 30, 40, 50 different places. So let's just add another day's work for that, but we've got how many people attending that meeting? Quite a lot, but we divide it by each community, so we'll add another day's work at least for that. And then we have all your professional training and support and things that you do to become good at what you're doing, so we'll add another half day for that. All your holidays, time you take off. And then at the bottom, we'll add the corporate structure and organisational structure that you need to support you working. So here we have the arrow. And we've got all this structure here that leads to this point here. Now just suppose that you don't get any attention at all, or you get people's attention and you just hold up a little piece of paper, you talk in long language, and when you leave people say, well, what did that person say? Or if someone went up and asked them, they'd say, well, they were a nice person, but I don't really know what they were talking about. I didn't understand. It was as if I show you this arrow, it's as if that top bit's been chopped off. that arrow is blunt. It is not going to go through and pierce to the other side, because it's really like there's a reverse arrow on the other side. So people pick up that information and you want that information to spread right through the whole organization. And if you've got this, where are you going to go? It's a big thing to think about. Now let's look at it in terms of being, firstly, professional, and secondly, investing. Clearly, where you have such a critical area, you've done all this work for this one critical area, it is really, really important that you make sure that your skills are at the highest level you can. You might be doing everything well in here, but if you're not getting that information across, everything here counts for nothing, doesn't it? Or very little. Secondly, if we just have a look at investing, let's suppose that we invested a certain figure in a big organization, perhaps, $50,000 would not be a lot of money. It is, of course, individually, but we invest 50,000. So we invest 50,000. Now, it's not really noticeable, is it? It's not hugely noticeable. Let's just make it a bit smaller even. So we invest 50,000. Now, amongst all your investment decisions, that's not a lot. You're investing in extra equipment, new desks, office space. Now, you invest that 50,000, and this is blocked here. What are you actually adding to the power of delivering to your clients? So here, if we added an investment of 50,000, that's a lot bigger, isn't it? A lot more effect. And there's a principle in business that we call looking at the limits to growth. So it is really important to invest where your biggest block is. And one of the biggest blocks that we have working, especially in the Indigenous field with Indigenous clients, is getting clear information. So you can imagine how important it would be to invest in this point here. And that is the tip of the arrow model. It's basically saying, what are you going to bring to your client? The value of bringing good, powerful information, and how that can be lost if that tip is blunt. So what we've described is we first of all just took a typical trip to a community or a remote client, saw that out of that 8 hours you just had half an hour of attention. Then we looked at the travelling time, the level of preparation, support, and then just organisational structure that goes behind that. And then said, well, in terms of the value chain to the client, where is the most critical point to invest, or where will your investment have the greatest impact? Investment of money and skills. Well, in this sort of situation, it's clear that you need to invest at the tip of the arrow to get the breakthrough, because if you have a blunt arrow, that message is not going to get through.